you're thinking something's missing, right? You're looking up here and you're saying, hey, wait a minute, what happened to the podium? We want to create a different kind of a mood, a different kind of feeling, where you feel like you're part of us and we're a part of you, and we're all singing together and we're all praying together, and we're all welcoming Shabbat in this sort of informal, casual, inviting place. We opened with Lech Hilach. It's one of the pieces of music that we sing at almost every bar bat mitzvah. And when it was written by Debbie Friedman, maybe 30 years ago, she was inspired by the words of this week's Torah portion. They evoked in her a sense of, it was Abraham setting off on his journey, and Sarah following with him and leading their family and going to create a new life in the Promised Land. And Debbie Friedman, the great singer and composer whose works we often we are familiar with in our services, was inspired by those words, and for her they became a charge that ultimately settled on bar and bat mitzvah students, young people, as a way of saying to them, look what lies ahead, look where you're going, that uncharted land of adulthood. And so it became almost an anthem at every bar and bat mitzvah. Any Reformed congregation you walk into, you'll hear that song being sung. It's appropriate that we sing it this evening because Rabbi Laufer and I, Rabbi Laufer sitting over there, are going to share some perspectives that we have on this week's Torah portion, the story Lech Lecha. We'll tell you more about it later, but see Lech Hilach, the song we began with, as one of the ways of bringing us into this particular Torah portion. So we welcome you. We're happy to have you with us. We're not going to in any way reference the Dodgers or what's going on in Houston.
Tonight's about Shabbat. It's not about sport, that kind of thing. I couldn't find my yarmulke earlier.
That was what it was about.
I grabbed it.
If you're not on Facebook, find someone who is. Type in Stephen Weiss Temple, and you need to see what this man who leads a large congregation in Los Angeles did to his face today. Artwork. Good. Not.
You gotta have spirit, Rabbi Stern.
And there was spirit at Stephen Weiss. There was spirit at Stephen Weiss.
Let's welcome Shabbat.
Let's do it. I think so.
Page 24. Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem LeShalom, Malachei HaShalom. Barechuni l'shalom, malachei ha'shalom, malachei elyon, limelech, malachei amlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Join us, tzedchem l'shalom, malachei ha'shalom. Page 2. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik shel Shabbat. Please be seated. Come together on page 20 to welcome the Sabbath. You may recognize this melody. You may not recognize this beautiful young woman on the bima with us. This is our friend Erez Sivan, singer-songwriter, and she's going to join us and help lead us in prayer. We turn to the words of our tradition, set to the beautiful melody by Leonard Cohen as we honor his yahrzeit tonight. Page 20.
לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת יקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה
You got it.
לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת יקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד השמיענו אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה בואי ושלום עטרת בלה גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת
Page 28. Remain standing. Our call to prayer.
Ya ותסמוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הרבים. Amen.
As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema is on page 34.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod, Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed.
Please be seated. Let's read together on page 37.
Love your God with every heartbeat, with every breath, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work, whether you are tired or you are rested. Let them guide the work of your hands. Keep them in the forefront of your vision. Do not leave them at the doorway of your house or outside your gate. They are reminders to do all of my mitzvot, so that you can be holy for God. I am Adonai, your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai, your God. Page 40. O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up, our guardian to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Hashkivenu is on page 42.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, be'or mideinu shomrei.
moments of quiet, and in these moments of breath, we turn from the busyness of a week into the quiet of Shabbat and into the shleimut, the wholeness of Shabbat. And each time as we do, I think for all of us, we know there's someone in our life, maybe it's ourself, maybe it's a loved one or a friend or a colleague who isn't quite whole this Shabbat and might not be quite whole next Shabbat, who is struggling with something in their body, something in their mind, something in their soul. And so I want us to invite in the quiet of these moments, I want to invite you to take just a breath to bring those loved ones, bring yourself or bring a friend into your heart as we turn to words of healing and words of wholeness, the Mishaberach on page 253.
One of the wonderful aspects of WISE is that we're surrounded by colleagues who are just astoundingly brilliant and have great insights on Torah and ideas to share. And we can explore a text or a passage or a story from so many different angles, and everybody brings a different constellation of interests and knowledge. So Rabbi Laufer and I were chatting about what we might do this evening and what we might share with you. And what we realized as we were talking is that, well, I asked her a question about the Torah portion. I told her what I was thinking about saying, and she said, well, I was actually looking at it this way. And I said, you know what we need to do? Instead of waiting a year, because if you did this another way, you'd have to wait a year for the Torah portion to come around again. Let's do it together, and let's share insights that we both have and show what it's like for two rabbis to be in dialogue about the Torah portion, to come at it, which is what we do with Torah. We come at it every year, having passed through another year of our lives. We come at it every year with the current events that surround us, the experiences that surround us, and it changes the flavor of the Torah portion. It changes the flavor of what pops out at us, what interests us, what engages us. And so the Torah portion takes on just a different tone and speaks to us differently every time we come around again to look at it. So one Torah portion, two rabbis, the many faces of Torah, as they say. So I'm actually going to tell you what I saw first. And this was actually at Rabbi Laufer's suggestion. She said, you know what? Mine picks up nicely where yours ends, so why don't you take it first? So I don't want anyone to think that I'm, right, jumping the line here, so to speak. So The fascinating thing about the Torah portion, and about reading a Torah portion, is recognizing that we read it through the lens of the ages that have come before us. We don't know Abraham as Abraham is actually presented in the Torah portion. We know Abraham as centuries and centuries of Jewish reinterpretation have presented Abraham to us. And it goes way beyond the simple meaning of the text. Because according to the way the tradition looks at Abraham, he's one who takes profound risks. He's one who speaks his truth even when the rest of the world isn't so ready to hear. And what the rabbinic elaborations and the stories that you might have heard, the midrashim, the stories about Abraham, portrays a character who has great depth, who possesses powerful conviction, and really has this singular commitment to his mission that he seeks to bring to the world. He's the first monotheist, as rabbis tell it, in a world that's filled with pagans and polytheists and idol worshippers. And the world doesn't want to hear his message. They don't want to hear what he has to say. And he's persecuted for those very beliefs. One storyteller imagines Abraham being thrown into a fiery furnace because he rejects that nation's notion of its many gods. And of course, as the storyteller has it, Abraham miraculously rises out of the flames and he survives and he goes on to continue his mission. In the telling of Abraham, as our tradition presents it, he's the truth teller. He's rejected by society, and there are times that he's dejected himself because of the dismissal that he faces. But the principal insight, I think, that surfaces, or the core principle that rises to the surface, is that when you are the first to proclaim a truth, the world doesn't want to hear. The world doesn't want to hear what you have to say. And when you're the first to proclaim those truths, it's risky and it's sometimes dangerous. So I was struck by this as I read an article in Time magazine. You know, we have some hearing assisting devices. It looks like some folks up here are having trouble hearing, and I'm using a microphone. So I think, why don't we give them those and that'll help them hear. Getting some hand signals that seem to imply that. Right up here, yeah. So you put one of these on, you'll be much better. We have guests from the Jewish home who are here with us. We're happy to have them. Every once in a while, we're fortunate to be able to enjoy their presence. So let's make sure they hear what we have to say since we're sharing our wisdom with them. Right? Why not? Test 1, 2, 3. Good? Now you got me? There we go. All right. So, to repeat what I was saying all over again. No, one thing. So this idea that Abraham was the truth teller, Abraham was the first one to stand up and proclaim his truths, and it was risky and sometimes dangerous, is a powerful message that I think our tradition brings forward to us. So I was struck by the power of this insight when I read an article in Time magazine. And the particular article, maybe you have the edition at home, it was describing why women remain silent in the face of male sexual harassment. And look, I look at the world through a man's lens, so there are things I don't get. And I often thought, how could the people who were, the serial numbers of women who were accosted by Harvey Weinstein, how could they all remain silent? Why didn't anyone speak out? I didn't understand. And this author, her name was Laurie Penny, tried to explain it. And she said that, and she noticed and observed that the costs of being the first to speak out are great. In her words, if you stand up to your rapist, you risk being iced out of your industry, called a liar and a lunatic, being shamed and humiliated. But then she goes on to say, there comes a time when one voice tips the scale. It's like in all those Hollywood protest movies where everyone seems to be going in the wrong direction and it looks like all is lost, and then one person stands up and says, no, this has to stop. No, you're going in the wrong direction. And then another stands up, and another stands up, and another stands up, and another stands up, and before you know it, the entire plot has changed direction of that movie. That's what's happening right now, she says. Someone finally stood up and said, enough. And everyone is finding the courage now to speak out after decades of silence. So that's what I think the Jewish spin on the Abraham story seeks to evoke in us. It says that the first Jew, as it were, is the one who's willing to stand up and say, enough. This pagan nonsense, this idolatry has to stop. Pay attention. Things have to change, and eventually the world came along with him and followed him. It's a Jewish superhero movie of sorts, if you will. Abraham's story reminds us of the difficulty and the importance of being the first. But even more importantly, it reminds us of the vital necessity of opening our eyes and listening to those who dare to be the first to speak out.
So Rabbi Stern mentioned superheroes, and I was thinking to myself, I saw Wonder Woman this summer, and I'm not a superhero fan. I don't go see superhero movies, but I saw it and I loved it. And I was like, rock on with that, feminist origin story. And so there's a tradition in Jewish learning where you teach something b'shem omro or b'shem omra in the name of one who spoke it. So I guess partly I'm dedicating this to Wonder Woman. And partly actually to Leonard Cohen of blessed memory, because I'm gonna reject some of his words, much as I love them. He once, in one of his songs, says, "If it be your will that I speak no more, may my voice be still as it was before." And it's a beautiful song, but I'm gonna reject that premise because I think our world has seen that actually maybe that's not such a good idea to go back into silence. So just a 30-second little history that as fifth-year rabbinic students at Hebrew Union College here in Los Angeles, we used to, I don't know if they still do this, we got to pick the verse to which we would roll a Torah that we carried down the aisle at our ordination. And it was surprisingly hard and surprisingly easy for me to pick it, because I'm a text person, and so at any given week, there's hundreds of texts that I'm speaking to and speaking with and excited about. But on the other hand, I knew immediately whose story I wanted to tell when I walked down the aisle that morning. Sarah, our ancestor, Sarah Imenu, is my spirit animal. She is my namesake. She was the very first connection I made with prayer when I was in religious school. And as I got older and as I learned more and as I actually lived parts of her story in my own life, I always appreciated her spunk and I valued her struggle. So my verse was from next week's parasha, but as so often happens, as I was thinking about this week, worlds converged. As Rabbi Stern mentioned, sort of my Facebook and my Twitter feeds were exploding with friends and colleagues sharing their stories that were all too familiar of sexual harassment and violence. And Cantor Emma and I were thinking about our first Rosh Chodesh service of the year. Many of the women who were there are here tonight, so they heard some of this. And then Rabbi Stern was like, wouldn't it be fun to be in dialogue? So I read Sarah again, and I read a different story this time. So we're in Parashat Lech Lecha. It is a story about journeys. And I realized that in these short chapters, Sarah takes her own journey. And it's kind of hard, and it's murky, and I want to think that maybe it is transformative. So I'm going to give 3 very quick vignettes from our parsha. Vayelach Avram ka'asher diber elav Adonai vayikach et Sarai ishto. So at the very beginning of the story, when God says to Abraham, "Go, leave everything you've ever known," it says that Avram went just as God had commanded him, and he took with him Sarai, his wife. And as I said on Wednesday, it's not the feminist superhero origin story that I want to go for. Sarai does not actually seem to be the object of her own life, taken from her, or it seems to be the object of her own life. She is taken, vayikach, they literally took her and placed her on a journey that she didn't choose. And some of the women on Wednesday helped me reread this verse. So I'll suggest maybe if she's not the agent of her own life, maybe here she's a willing participant. But either way, she's silent. Second, there's this sort of take my wife please moment. It's bad in Canaan, there's a famine, and Avram decides he's going to take the mishpacha, which is small at the time, down to Egypt to try to find food. And as they get there, he says to Sarai, look, I know you're gorgeous, you're beautiful, and if the king sees you, he's going to want you for himself. And if he knows we're married, he'll kill me and take you. So he says to Sarah, literally, Imrina achoti at, laman yitavli. Abraham says to Sarah, tell him that you're my sister, so that it'll go well for me. And whether or not Sarai speaks here is unclear, but she ends up in the king's harem, until the plot at least is revealed. And there's a scholar who noticed that it says vatukach. It's this rare passive was taken, not even that Avram took her, but that she was taken, so that she's sort of stripped of her individuality. And in fact, nobody in these stories actually uses her name. It's just she and her. So again, as far as feminist origin story, we're not batting 1,000. But then we come to the last. So now's where it gets interesting and complicated, and I want to maybe think profound. So as you might know, Sari has been unable to bear a child up to this moment. And I imagine, like any of us who've been through it, she sort of tried just about everything and nothing worked, and so she makes a suggestion. She sort of tries to take this story into her own hands. And the story of taking a surrogate doesn't actually work out all that well for her in the end, but we're going to put that to the side for another year, because I think what's important is what happens when Sarah actually tells her story, that she tells her truth and she opens up and she says to Abraham, look, I've been unable to bear a child. God hasn't given me this gift and this blessing, and I am struggling with it, but here's what I think we should do. And in that moment, there's this phrase, one of these phrases I told the group I've passed over for years. But this year I noticed it, maybe because of what's going on, and it says, Vayishma Avram lakol Sarai. Abraham listens to Sarah's voice. Vayishma Avram, that he more than listens, I think he hears it and he understands it. So I said, Sarai's story is complicated and it's murky, and it's like all of our stories that are complicated and murky, but I think this week that I needed to read it, right? I think Torah places texts that we need in front of us, because I think I really needed her to transform from silence to voice. I needed her, like women around me, to be able to tell her story, and I needed that nechemta, I needed that comfort, because I needed Abraham to hear it.
So I've got a question for you.
She's cutting us off, though. She's cutting us off.
Oh, is she? All right. 2 questions.
We got 2 minutes. Great.
So I graduated from high school. Everybody knows it was my birthday because it's all over Facebook last week. So it even tells you how old I am, so no secrets anymore in this world. So I graduated from high school in 1979. So I came of age, as it were, through the 70s, the era of women's liberation, right? And then through the 80s, we thought we had figured it out. And then all of a sudden, like, here we are again. It seems like nothing has really changed. So it's been like, I would say it's maybe been like 5,000 years of human existence. We haven't quite gotten it right yet. Will we ever, you talked about hearing. What does it take to get us to hear? What does it take to get men to actually listen to the voices of the women crying out?
So I'm laughing because, I really always like to be the voice of all women everywhere. It's a very comfortable, seat to sit. I think part of why I love this interplay is it's what you said about Avram, right? That you have to be willing to speak up, and I think that's true across, any gender lines. You have to be willing to speak up, and you have to be brave enough to tell your truth, and that can be a really hard thing to do. But I also think it's in this interplay of speech and silence, right? That what Abraham does here is not jump in and not say, no, it'll be fine, or here's something else we could try, right? He is able to, even though he's the one who speaks up through so much of Torah, I have a question about that, right? He's the one who is quiet and actually opens up the space for someone else to hear to speak their voice. And so again, I don't know that it's a gender question, right? I think it's a human question of how do we learn when we actually need to speak up, and how do we learn when we need to listen and open up the space for other people to speak up.
So it's not just about speaking up, it's about listening.
I would say so. So there's my question for you in my 1 minute left. We've painted Abraham, and tradition always paints Abraham as the great spokesman for justice. He famously goes to God and says, Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat, that the one who is the great judge of all the earth isn't going to act justly. But Abraham is sometimes, I just said this whole nice thing about silence, and we need to stop and we need to listen. Abraham has some problematic silences. Even before we get, spoiler alert for next week, he has some problematic silences in this Torah portion, right? God says, take everything you've ever known, leave and go, and he is just totally silent. Or, he says to Sarai, tell him you're my wife, and then he sort of is silent and waits to see what happens. So I guess I would want to know, how do you make that decision? How do you think Abraham makes that decision? How do we make the decision of when we need voice and when we need silence?
Badly, poorly. No, I think sometimes the problem is that we're quiet when we shouldn't be, and we scream when we shouldn't. And I think that's part of, right, what the beauty of the story of Abraham is. And when you study the text as a text and you try to strip away the layers of reinterpretation and you say, why did our ancestors write this particular passage this way? Why did they write this story this way? Why did they frame this passage about Abraham this way? And you begin to see that there are many voices speaking in the story, many perspectives. You realize that that's kind of who we are as human beings, that we're profoundly flawed and we have momentary bursts of creativity and success, right? Maimonides kind of gives this image of an apple, a golden apple covered with filigrees of silver. And he says, you don't see the gold much. Sometimes you just see the duller silver over the gold. And that's maybe the way humanity is. Like the gold shines through once in a while, but more often than not, it's the tarnished silver.
So we're going to invite some silence now. That prayer, too, is a space between spoken words and heart words, a chance to sing and be in communal conversation, and also a time to be reflective in our own space and in our own needs. So we're going to invite you, if you want to follow the words of the Amidah as they are in the prayer book, it's pages 46 to 62, and we're going to give you some space for silence and reflection.
Please rise. When you're finished, you may be seated. So even in the face of darkness, we hold on to hope, and maybe that's what keeps us going. The two prayers for Israel and the United States capture the deepest hopes we have for both of those nations. Page 258 and 259. O guardian of life and liberty, May our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace. May we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen.
Avinu שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, ברך מדינת ישראל, ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו.
O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen.
אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, אמן, סלאם, אמן, סלאם.
So in a moment, not yet, we're all going to rise and celebrate with Alan Akavan as he comes forward to lead us in the Kiddush. But before we all stand, I want to just make sure that we're going to recognize everyone for their celebration. So if your birthday is this week, would you please rise? That would be me. Anybody else? Anybody else have birthdays this week? No? If you had a special anniversary this week, would you rise? There we go. How about if you just returned from a trip that was inspirational this week? How about, that's a reason to give thanks. Anybody just returned from a good trip? Oh, your anniversary? Oh, well, that counts. Anniversary and bar mitzvah, all right. Anybody celebrate the birth of a child or grandchild? How about that? Any of that going on around here? What else, Rabbi Yosh? You got any more?
Well, I think, Rabbi Stern had a milestone birthday.
Was it a milestone?
It's another year. I think we should sing him a happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Rabbi Ron Stern.
Happy birthday to you.
Ronald Howard Stern.
Happy birthday, dear Ron Stern. Happy birthday to you.
Many more, Rabbi Stern.
You haven't lived until you had the Stephen
Happy
Wise Band sing you a happy
anniversary,
birthday.
Simchas, and
All
let's all
right,
rise for Kiddush.
the Kiddush is on page 5. Please rise. The Aleinu is on page 282. Please remain standing.
שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל עמודם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר
Please be seated. Mazel tov, everybody. Careful on the stairs. I'd like to invite Laurie Goodman and Janine Kolodny. It's probably good for the mic, isn't it? Janine Kolodny to come forward, if you would. Oh, I thought you were coming up together. It's mine. You don't want to stand next to Laurie? Do you want her to, or you're good on your own? She's good on her own, Janine. Oh, there we go.
Shabbat Shalom. My name is Laurie Goodman. I'm a new board member at Stephen Wise. Oh, sorry. Now? Can you hear me now? Sorry. Shabbat Shalom. My name is Laurie Goodman. I'm a new board member at Wise Temple, and thank you so much for joining us at this beautiful Shabbat service this evening. We hope to see everyone on Sunday, November 5th, for our Cats Family Pavilion and Shalom Garden dedication ceremony. We're all very excited about it, and Mitzvah Day will be following, so this will be a very big day for our community to come together and celebrate this beautiful new centerpiece of our campus and to help others and perform wonderful works of Tikkun Olam. So hope to see you all there.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you both. We know that as much as we gather on Shabbat for celebrations, we're also here to comfort those who might be in mourning or who are recognizing the anniversaries of the loss of a loved one. So we recognize that by asking those of you who are here for that reason, for those reasons to rise. So if you are here in the first 30 days of mourning for a loved one, please rise. If you're in the first year of mourning for a loved one, please rise. If you're observing the yahrzeit or the anniversary of the death of a loved one, please rise. And now we stand beside you in support and strength as we recite the Kaddish with you. Page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi v'amad yivarach utei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael v'agala u'vizman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbi mivarach le'olam u'l'almei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei d'kudusha b'richu le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'miran bi'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rab amin shamaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all Israel and all the world, to which we say, amen. Seated or standing? What do you think's best? Please be seated. Wonderful treat to end.
So as was mentioned earlier, Leonard Cohen, his yahrzeit is this Shabbat. So in tribute to a great singer, a sweet singer of Israel, his most famous song, Hallelujah. Please sing along on the choruses, and you'll notice one of the verses, we're using a beautiful Hebrew translation of that verse, and our friend Erez, all the way from Eretz HaKodesh via Los Angeles now, is here to join us and to help us.
Now I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty and the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to a kitchen chair. She broke your throne. She cut your hair, and from the lips she drew the hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
I did my best, it wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I told the truth, I didn't come to fool ya. And even though it all went wrong, I stand before the Lord of Song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
אולי נסעתי שם לשווא, אני לא ממש זוכר עכשיו. האם זה משנה לך? מדוע בכל מילה ושם יש אור, ולא חשוב אם המזמור הוא שבר או שלמות של הללויה. 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 Hallelujah. Shabbat, shalom.
I'm feeling like some challah, some hallelujah. What do you say? Who wants to help us lead the motzi? Maybe all of our young ones can come and lead motzi. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hotzi lechem min haaretz, Shabbat shalom.
here before. I've seen this room and I've walked this floor. I used to live alone before I knew you. And I've seen your flag on the marble arch. And love is not a victory march. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. 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 Sing another verse. Sing another verse. Keep that beat. You just sing another verse.
Maybe there's a God above, and all I've ever learned from love was how to show somebody who outdrew you. And it's not a cry that you hear at night. It's not somebody who's seen the light. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Good Shabbat.